Do you ever feel like you don't have a tattoo style? I felt like that forever, and I was seeing all these artists around me developing their own direction and style. I wanted so badly to have my own style. So in today's video, I'm going to talk to you guys about some tips and tricks about finding your own style and how I found mine. I appreciate you guys giving feedback on the videos and letting me know what kind of videos you want. This video was inspired by exactly that. So if you guys have more ideas, concepts, or things you'd like to talk about, let me know in the comments. So, speaking of styles, we're doing one of my favorite. As you guys know, the castles. The castles I only started doing about 5 or 6 years ago. So this was something that, halfway through my career, I decided to try a new style. And then I've continued to do this throughout my career, and I think exploring new styles or even developing new styles is something great to do. When you've been tattooing a long time, it helps you, stay interested. You're looking for new things to be inspired by. I think it is good to take note if you're getting bored of something or you're feeling a little less passionate. For me in the beginning, it was all about the end result. So as I was producing tattoos, the only thing I really cared about was the end result. In the beginning of tattooing, everything was like a struggle. I was nervous to talk to the client, I was nervous to design, I was nervous to tattoo, so I really wasn't paying attention to the procedure as much. I was just, asking myself, did the tattoo come out good? Did the lines look clean? And as I started getting more comfortable in tattooing as a whole, which was probably 5-6 years into it, only then did I start asking the question did I have fun creating that? And with that, developed a whole new style of exploration for myself. And I would start sketching different things, painting, really paying attention to the journey of getting to the final product. And when I saw the 3RL, the stipple shading, it just looked fun. So that became a factor that was never involved prior to that. So I don't know if you guys are experienced this, have gone through it, maybe it's something you haven't even thought about before. But there's all these factors that can play into what we love about tattooing. So I was doing mostly photorealism at the time, which was such a struggle journey-wise. I just remember almost suffering through most of the process. It's very stressful trying to get this end product that I was happy with. And I realized it didn't have to be like that all the time. So it's where do you start? Where do you start with finding your style? I started by just kind of looking at other artists, guest spotting, looking at different tattoos people had done online. A great source of inspiration is books, seeing what some of the masters had done. Obviously, end product is going to factor in. It would be so cool if I could create something like that, But also paying attention to, is there more behind it? Do we want to tell a story? Do we want to use symbolism? Are there a certain theme that we tend to gravitate towards more? For me, the dark stuff is just more appealing. More horror, more textures in that area. Even just a common theme. Am I going to do something fluffy or light? Or am I going to do it dark and kind of creepy and scary? And as you start breaking down these factors, you start to develop a direction. And you can pick up on these similarities. I think if you're new or still exploring styles, which hopefully you're doing that even if you're old, it's good to try a little bit of everything and just pay attention to the process. Was that a struggle? Did I enjoy making that? Did I like the end result? Do other people like this style? Because obviously that factors in, right? we're doing all these cool designs, but no one likes them or ever wants to get them tattooed, then that might be a little bit of a struggle. It could be helpful to get involved in some more niche communities, because then you become one of, if not the only one, that can do that. So like I said before, we're getting these this castle in here. The castles have definitely evolved over the years, you know, and which was a style that I wanted to do. I didn't even really know how. I just remember I liked architecture. You know, my dad's an architect. I liked the idea of doing castles and cathedrals. I liked that a lot of time they were associated with dark art. I had no idea how I would position them on the bodies, but it was like enough to start looking. And then as I tattooed it more, I realized all the moving parts and the different variety of castles you could offer. So like in the beginning, I did a lot of castles that were just symmetrical because they were way easier to draw. It was symmetrical, so it was a little easier to place on the body. More like a patchwork or like a sticker look. Then I started asking myself the question of, could I make this into a sleeve, you know? So you start exploring other options, and that's when we saw perspective changes. You know, maybe I would see some comparisons in different neo work. A lot of my castles in the beginning were very like neo-traditional. Working with other artists, exploring different art, I got turned on to the illustrative work, which just for whatever reason, I was like, I kind of like that look a little better. You know, I felt like I could get more detail in there. I like the way that the separation is created in that style of art. And I would just try it, like, okay, like even though I'm doing more neo castles, if I did an illustrative castle, what would that look like? So that turned me on to illustrative artists. So then that forced me to look more into illustrative artists, which I actually wasn't familiar with at all. So that was a really cool experience, seeing tons of new artwork and a new style, learning different approaches to similar elements. What I mean by that is the clouds, for example. You know, we've all seen clouds. I'm sure a lot of us have tattooed them. There's so many different ways to do that. I think one important thing with finding a new style or trying to develop a style is looking at patterns and themes. So one thing I used to think about all the time was, how cool would it be if someone saw a tattoo and was like, is that a John Nelson tattoo? Right? I was like, man, that'd be so cool. But it's like, how do we do that? And the key is definitely finding a style and finding a direction. And the more we can make it our own and the more recognizable we can do that, the better chance we have of it being recognized. The key repeating patterns, I think those are the elements that really show. You know, one of my favorite examples is Moscow, right? I feel like it's so easy to identify one of his pieces because you're like, oh, it's a fire color realism portrait, typically pop culture, with a bunch of graffiti on it, you know, and he's one of few to really do that, and then kind of the inventor of it in the tattoo world. So it's so easy to look at one and be like, oh, that's Mosh, you know. Now I'll give you an example. So we picked a main subject matter, which is the castles, and then can we add in some repeating elements? So in this case, it might be the clouds. Like, okay, clouds, but can I do the clouds in a way that is like a John Nelson way, where like maybe if you see it, you know that I'm the only one or I'm one of few that do it in this way. And this might sound like a really simple concept, but it's something that you can implement today in your own artwork to start developing some recognition. It's fun for me to pick a couple elements, a couple, you know, different subject matter, and then become really familiar with those things, because there's so many ways to do one thing. So I just told you the development of the castles or the architecture. I kind of like to do more of like cities rather than like single buildings. I like to play with perspective. You know, this is kind of like looking from the side. One of the hardest parts for me with the castles was figuring out how I could show depth and flow. Now it might look easy, but I was just doing kind of standalone castles. So to have the city, like the multiple buildings going on, that's how I started to show depth, to make the pieces look really dynamic. So that's why I'll like layer the buildings. But then it's like, okay, how do I show flow? You guys have seen in some of my designing videos, I'll draw body flow and then typically put some light elements or some like negative space to show the flow. In this case, it's the clouds, right? Showing this kind of movement here, how the leg goes. But I wasn't sure at first, like, do I want lightning? Do I want clouds? So like, let's say I'm picking the clouds. And then I'm like, okay, clouds might become a constant in my artwork. Let's figure out a cool way to do clouds. So I want you guys to start thinking about this, and like if it applies to you, maybe it doesn't, but if you're searching for a style, it's like, where is my inspiration coming from? Do I enjoy the process? Some people like love working with big pens, prefer pencils, some people like markers. You know, I love the big pens. So for me, the 3RL is like really similar to that. Maybe like markers and like a mag would be like more fun. Start thinking about themes, subject matter, and then also the accents, like the clouds. And pick your favorite things. And then your favorite things end up becoming your own style. Then you might start getting recognized for your work. Alright, so we have a bunch of factors in this piece in relation to talking about style, and really what we're trying to do is just develop patterns and themes that we like. So for me, you know, like I said, I have the castles. My preference with the castles is just the thinner lines. So as I started the castles, I really just tried everything. You know, like, do I like thick lines, do I like thin lines, lines in the middle, 3RL, do I like mag? And throughout this, picking different preferences. So obviously I like the 3RL. You know, I do have change line weights, but they're not that aggressive. It's usually just skipping one, so that was a preference. Like, it's almost like I'm on the thinner line weight kind of side. You know, I have these clouds in here. A lot of times recently, the castles are taking up the whole panel. You know, 3RL texture. All these elements create a style. So I want you to start paying attention to your own elements. I want you to try new things, even if it's just one thing. Like, okay, I like castles, but I'm just gonna try it with thicker line weights. Or I'll just try, you know, adding the 3RL in there. And then you'll decide like, okay, yes, I like that change, or no, I don't like that change, and the preferences develop. You can break it down even further. You know, like, okay, do I like to draw the windows like this? Do I like, what perspective do I like? That's obviously in relationship to the castles, but this could be applied to a face. You know, you start getting used to doing eyes a certain way, or, you know, you start having signatures in there. Like, we know Alex Sorsa always does that crazy big drop shadow in the eyelash. You could go really simple on lips. You could come up with your own preferences on how you do lips or nose, you know? But the more you try these things and realize what you like and what you want to apply to your own art, you create some repetition, you have some repeating accent images, and all of a sudden the style is being developed. So we're almost at the end of today's tattoo with a lot of my preferences locked in there. One thing I had noticed on some previous tattoos is I really liked these clouds being negative space, but I wanted to emphasize them more. So on this one, we're adding in just kind of these light cloud backgrounds, which just gives me the ability to make kind of the background, you know, just not skin tone, a light gray. You can even see right here, it really pushes out that negative cloud a lot more. So that's something very new that I've been doing, is trying to add these negative clouds or this negative influence for the flow. And I can really make that pop out by the surrounding areas being tattooed. Even if it's just a light gray, it almost makes the clouds look lighter. So we're always adapting, we're always changing, always trying new things. You know, I know plenty of huge artists that change their style all the time, trying new things, keeping themselves, you know, interested and engaged. I don't think it's a bad thing, even if you're changing styles all the time. And the best part about the castles, and especially the 3RL texturing, is it's just so fun for me to do. Like, the application of it is fun, so it makes me enjoy the process a lot. And I remember that was something really important to me. The longer I was tattooing, I was like, man, I need to find something that is just enjoyable to actually do, because I spend so much time doing it. Before I was only concerned about the final product, and a lot of that was like stressful. Like, when I would do those photorealism images, it's like you were just this slave to a reference photo, you know, and it didn't leave much room for like creativity or like making stuff as you go. And to me, that was important, you know, in my own artwork. So I'm just gonna get the final touches in here, add a round of black. We'll get some final product, and you guys will be able to check out this kind of castle city.